Hello and welcome to this Mirror Facebook Live, all about what this week's record 9.4% inflation figure means for you and what to do about it. We'll be talking today about what's been happening with inflation this week, what's going up in price, and what you can do to help bring your bills down, plus an update on some of the other help that's available to you if you're struggling. And as an additional kind of sweetener, we're going to be talking about some of the supermarket help schemes and restaurant help schemes to kind of give you a little bit of a boost over the coming weeks. I'm Sam Barker. I'm a money reporter here at the Mirror. I'm hugely grateful to be joined today by Mirror business editor Graham Hiscott. Hello, Graham. Oh, so I've just been told we're having having a bit of technical difficulty. Graham will be sort of dialing into this call, and we'll be hearing from him shortly. But as well as kind of talking you through some of the big news on inflation this week, we're also here to answer your questions. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, or you just want to have your views heard, please feel free to post in the chat underneath. We will do our absolute best to answer your questions, both during the session and towards the end. So what we're going to do is just kind of get started by talking about some of the big news this week to do with inflation. So figures from the Office for National Statistics showed that inflation hit 9.4% in June. This is the latest figures available. What that means is that if something cost £1 on average a year ago, the same item would cost around £1.9, £1.90 something, £1.09 and 0.4 of a penny today. So these are very rough figures. It doesn't quite work like, not every single thing has gone up in price by 9.4%. It does depend what you're buying. The way that the ONS looks at this is they'll look at a basket of goods, and this ranges from food to petrol to energy prices, dog toys, the whole 9 yards. They'll look at those price increases over a year, whether things are going up or down, add it all together and divide by the number, and that gives you inflation. So this is kind of bad news because inflation is actually rising. It's been rising very significantly. The figure for May was 9.1%. Obviously, we're now at 9.4%. This is quite a worry for households. The Bank of England tries to keep the inflation figure at around 2% a year. So obviously, we are wildly above that, and this has a huge knock-on impact on your money. So the amount of money that you can save, how much it costs for you to buy things at supermarket checkouts. We're going to get into all of this, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to protect your money against some of the big pressures that we're seeing, and these include energy bills, petrol, food, and more. So let me just introduce Graham Hiscott, who is the Mirror business editor. Hello, Graham. How are you?
Oh, hi there, Sam. Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. So I've just kind of, we've just sort of brought the viewers up to speed with some of the big news this week. Obviously, that inflation kind of is rising, and that this is, something which we're going to get into and talk about some of the help available today. But I just wanted to ask, Graham, could you kind of sort of set the scene for us slightly? What are some of the kind of the reasons that we're seeing inflation rise so much, please?
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, there's three things really. The first backdrop to a lot of this is energy prices, which anyone listening to this will know. I don't need to explain to anyone really what's happened with energy. It's just gone through the roof, and perhaps we're going to talk about what's to come later in the year. But that there's certainly energy is the big factor driving up inflation. The other two factors, again, anyone who listening into this will know about this very well, is if you're a driver, well, goodness knows you know how much fuel and petrol and diesel prices have gone up by. The ONS came out with those stats yesterday showing that the price at the pump is over 40% what it was last year. 40%. That's how much the prices of filling up are over the last year. The other one is food. It's been a bit of more of a slow creep, but food. Looking at the ONS figures, the average food bill over the last year has gone up by just south of 10%, and there were some other figures earlier on this week from number crunchers Kantar, and they said if you're budgeting ahead, you should be expecting to pay maybe another 450 quid a year in addition to what you've already seen your food bills go up by for your groceries over the next 12 months. So, so it's those three big factors: energy, food, fuel.
Absolutely, and yeah, as Graham says, these are the the biggest headaches really for the average households. They're enormous parts of our outgoings at any normal time, let alone now. And by and large, these are costs which we have to pay. If you need to run a car as a household, it needs fuel that costs money. There's only so much you can get around that. Now that said, there are ways that you can save money on these areas, and I want to just go through these now. It's probably worth saying to start that this is a bit of a game of inches. So, I wish that, people in my position, we could kind of just say, look, they're like the olden days, here's a way that you can save huge amounts of money on your, petrol bills or your supermarket bills. At the moment, we're not really looking at that world, but we have got quite a lot of news, but good news. But I think that the thing to bear in mind is that this is a lot of kind of small bits of help which add up to a bigger bit of help, if you see what I mean. But that said, let's kind of start talking about the three big areas and what you can do to kind of cut down, save money in these areas. So let's start. I'm going to start with the bad news first, and that's energy bills. So sadly, there isn't a huge amount that you can do to bring the price of energy down beyond using less energy. There are no real cheap energy deals available at the moment, as I would define cheap. And the best option for many households is to use a variable rate energy deal, which more than 80% of households are now on. That's because that is regulated by the Ofgem price cap. So that price cap is, however, quite still very, very high. It's £1,971 a year currently, and that is due to rise up to £3,240 a year in October, and that is just for average energy use for the average home. So a question we get asked an awful lot, and I had some readers emailing me about this yesterday, is energy prices are really, really high. I'm really worried about it. I know they're going to go up again in October, and there's a fighting chance that they could actually go up again in January of next year. Although we haven't got a crystal ball, and it is quite hard to look that far ahead. I'm really, really worried about this. Is it better for me to get a fixed rate energy deal now, and then hope that when the prices go up again in October, that I've got a little bit of protection? So I think that it's quite a difficult thing to answer, because it sort of depends on people's individual circumstances. But I think the kind of best advice out there is if you can find a fixed rate energy deal where the price is 25% less than the current price cap, then it may be worth a look. But frankly, these deals are like hen's teeth. So I think that the best option for most households is to try and keep your energy costs as low as possible, stay on the cheapest possible deal, hope for more government intervention on energy bill costs. At the moment, we're not seeing an awful lot of kind of new news coming from Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, who are the two Conservatives who are in the running to become Prime Minister. They haven't pulled any kind of rabbits out of the hat in terms of fresh energy bill help, cost of living help for households, but they are being pressured to do that. So watch this space. But the other thing to do, if you are really worried about energy bill costs, is to make use of the financial help which is available to you and know your rights. And we're going to have more on that later. So on to slightly better news, petrol. So petrol and diesel prices, as Graham says, they hit a record high, in fact, a series of record highs throughout this year, and they peaked earlier in July. Many drivers were paying more than £2 a litre to fill up their cars. Now, the slightly better news is that these prices are now starting to drop, and within 2 weeks, you could be paying £10 a tank less than you are now, according to the AA. And that's because the wholesale cost of oil is beginning to fall, and the hope is that forecourts will pass this on to you as a driver, and you will be paying less as a result. However, even with that saving, you are still facing historically very, very high prices to fill up your car. And with prices so high, there are a few things that you can do to help offset that. We've been speaking to motoring experts, so the AA, the RAC, and some others, to say, well, look, if what you really want to do is save money on petrol and make your car as efficient as possible, what should you do? And this is what they've told us. So the first thing is you want to find the cheapest fuel near you. Obviously, there's no point in filling up on cheap fuel if you've had to drive 50 miles to get there. But what really, there are fantastic websites and apps like petrolprices.com. These let you put in your address and get a list of updated forecourt prices in your area. It's updated every day. So that's the way of making sure that you're getting the absolute best deal on petrol near you. If you're really struggling with the cost of petrol, it makes sense to eke every single mile you can out of a tank of fuel. And this is what the AA and the RAC have told us. So if you have a well-maintained car, it is up to 10% more efficient than one that has been allowed to go to seed a little bit. So, keeping your car serviced, doing all the things that a lot of, we know we're supposed to do, but a lot of us don't do all the time, topping up the oil and so on, that can help drag an extra 10% out of every single tank of fuel. So it really is worth thinking about. Another thing is that heavier cars use more fuel. So the advice from a lot of motoring organisations is take all of the clutter out of your car, everything which you don't need, take it out of there. If you've got any antifreeze in the boot, for example, a hangover from the winter months, take that out of there. You're very unlikely to need that, especially with the weather we've been having recently. A slightly more controversial one is that a lot of motoring experts, they say, well, you shouldn't be putting a full tank of fuel into your car unless you really need to, because obviously a full tank of fuel weighs an awful lot, and then you're using fuel to kind of drag that extra weight around. I would say, be a little bit cautious with that, because obviously the last thing you want to do is run out of fuel because you kind of not filled up as much as you need to. But I think it is worth thinking about, if you're using your car for sort of short hops and you live in an environment with a lot of petrol stations, it is worth thinking about. Another thing which I think a lot of us don't think about is that underinflated tires are less efficient. So if you top your tires up to the recommended level, which is normally printed on the side of the tire, you can make sure you can actually get an extra. This is what the RAC told us: an extra 26 miles out of a 60-litre tank of fuel just by putting more air into your tires and bringing them up to the kind of recommended level. Again, really worth thinking about. So another one. This is a hot weather one. Obviously, I don't need to tell you, it's been absolutely roasting this week. And if you're driving around, absolutely, you're going to need to sort of bring that temperature down. So you're basically looking at the difference for your air conditioning or opening your windows. So the RAC say that putting the aircon on can raise the amount of fuel that you burn by up to 10%. But opening your window, well, you might think, well, opening the window's free. But obviously, if you have your window open, it can increase the drag of your car, which also increases fuel costs. So the obvious question now is, well, what's better? So what the RAC say, as a rule of thumb, if you're driving in towns and cities, opening your car window is cheaper than putting the aircon on, because you're going at a lower speed. At higher speeds, so kind of 50 miles an hour, A road speed and motorway speed, if you open the window, it creates so much drag that it's actually more fuel efficient in that situation to use the aircon. So moving on to food. So as Graham says, the price of food has been creeping up. But over the course of the year, that really adds up. We're paying almost 10% more for our food today than we were a year ago. And with everything else, the cost of living crisis, all of this really adds up, and it is really hitting people in the pocket now. And this won't be lost on anybody that's been at the supermarket checkouts recently. That 10% figure also hides quite a lot within it. So milk, for example, has gone up by 26% in that time, butter by 21%. Cooking oils by 18%. There's been a shortage of cooking oil as well. A lot of supermarkets are still rationing that. So we are looking at across the board increases in food bills. So some things that you can do about that, obviously, it goes without saying. You can look at the supermarket economy schemes. Classic advice from Martin Lewis, a money saving expert, is looking down at supermarkets can save you huge amounts on your food bills, because the cheaper food tends to be put lower down on shelves. More expensive food at eye level, where it's more convenient. Also, supermarket loyalty schemes are definitely worth a look. Over time, these can save you quite a lot of money, and they have other bundled deals included, which can save you quite a lot of cash over the long term. If you can, and you're lucky enough to live near an Aldi is currently the cheapest supermarket according to Consumer Champions Which. That's followed by Lidl. Normally, it's either Aldi or Lidl kind of duking it out for the cheapest supermarket spot. Then it's Asda and Tesco. But there is other help available from supermarkets and restaurants this summer to help bring down food bills and even treat yourself on the cheap. So Graham, can you talk us through what are some of the schemes out there to kind of help people that have been announced over the last couple of days, please?
Yeah, well, very much. Yeah, actually, I know today there are. Well, actually, today we've had a big announcement from a relatively big announcement from the government. It's called Help for Households. I mean, actually, it's from the government. Actually, it's totally funded by the private sector. But these are companies. These are who announced certain initiatives that to help people manage their budgets over the coming month or so. I mean, one of the bits. So, as an example, ASDA, which was running a £1, so kids meals for £1 offer over the summer, that's now being extended to the end of the year. So what does that mean? So that means that if you can go into an Asda, one of Asda's cafes, over 200 of them, and get a kids meal. So that's a hot meal, fish fingers, chicken nuggets, that sort of thing, or a cold meal, so like a packed lunch type meal for a £1. I mean, it's brilliant. You can. There's no minimum spend for the adult, and kids can actually, if they're perhaps a teenager or whatever, they can go into those cafes and get the meal for free. So I mean, this is a when we're seeing the prices, as you were highlighting, on food, I mean, going up as much as they can do, and some, particularly through the summer holidays when kids won't obviously be able to benefit from the free school meals, initiative. They can't get a decent meal through being at school. I mean, these sorts of things are going to be incredibly important. So Asda is doing its £1 offer. Other supermarkets such as Sainsbury's are expanding their feed a family for a £5. Morrison's are doing a similar thing with a free meal if you the kids a kids meal with a adult meal offer. So it's definitely worth looking out for a few of these things. If you're lucky enough to be able to go out and eat out, for instance, again, there are lots of loyalty schemes which are already running, but I think will be even more useful at the moment, and perhaps people will be being a bit more savvy about being able to take advantage of them. So this week we've had Burger King and McDonald's launch their loyalty schemes. I mean, I have to say, you have to shell out quite a lot sometimes to get free food. So, for instance, with Burger King, you have to spend £15 before you can redeem those points for some small fries. And if you want a double Whopper meal, we have to spend £80 in Burger King in first. So it's not an incentive to get the free item at the end of it. That shouldn't be the point. But you know what? If you're spending the money anyway, then you might you can benefit from points as you go along. And lots of restaurants are doing a similar thing. Pizza Express, if that's your thing, have also got a very good loyalty scheme that they've launched as well. It's proving very, very successful. And Sam, actually, there's some really great advice there you gave on energy and driving. Driving, there, really, really good tips there. One thing I would say on energy as well. Consider a smart meter. They've had a bit of ups and downs to their reputation, but when they're working, they're a really good way of being able to monitor your usage and potentially to manage it, and certainly getting around the problem of estimated bills, which is, anyone listening to this will have, I'm sure, have had their issues with that in the past. So that's one thing to look out for to try and trim your energy bill.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Graham. And also I should just kind of chip in and say, this is very much an interactive session. We're on hand to answer your questions. If you've got any questions about the rising cost of living or any of the government help available, please do feel free to post it. In a minute, I'm going to give you some updates on the government cost of living help. But yeah, just to kind of flag it, please feel free, post in the chat. We do monitor it, and we will answer your questions. Obviously, just to slightly piggyback on something that Graham has said there. Free school meals, obviously, over the the school holidays, which are obviously coming up from the end of this week, is a cold comfort because you won't be getting it. However, this is hot off the press. In fact, it's so hot off the press we haven't even written it yet. My understanding is that Iceland is accepting free school meal vouchers over the kind of period. Now, I don't quite know the details yet. I was just told this just before I came into this meeting. We will be writing about it. So keep your eyes peeled on the Mirror website. If your child gets free school meals, it does look like you will be able to get some sort of help from Iceland over the summer holidays over the next 6 weeks. Now, Graham, obviously, what we're talking about today is the rising cost of living as shown by inflation. It's really, really high at the moment. To anyone who's watching, and is maybe a little bit, wondering, well, what's next? What is the likely future for inflation, please?
Well, Sam, I mean, I wish I could say that things are going to get better, but they're not. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, basically, we haven't got our heating on obviously at the moment, so we're not really feeling the impact of the higher heating bills quite at the moment. But I mean, the big issue coming on down the tracks at a rapid speed is what's going to happen in the autumn, and that's when I think bills are going to go up quite rapidly. In fact, they are going to go up quite dramatically. Certainly when it comes to the energy. Just to recap slightly, the Ofgem, who the energy regulator, they have a price cap. They review that twice a year. That might end up being 4 times a year, but that's one for another day to discuss. Anyway, they're due to announce how much their price cap, which polices how much 23 million households pay for their energy. They announce what that price cap from October is going to be at the end of August. So we're talking about a month away and a bit. Most experts are saying now that that price cap, which is currently 1,971 as an average, obviously it differs greatly depending on your usage and your circumstances. That 1,971, as you said, actually, I think could jump to over 3,200 in October. I mean, we say these figures and they kind of, you kind of get used to the fact that but actually in reality, that's going to be dramatic. It's going to be just life-changing for so many people. And then in January, they may change that. They may also change the cap again, so it might go up, not quite so much, but something like 3,300. So you're talking about a huge increase in energy outlay. At the same time, food inflation, which we've been talking about, is almost 10%. That's predicted to go above 10%, maybe something like 12%, maybe even 15%. Just to make things even more worrying, I'm afraid, if you're a borrower and you've got something like a variable rate mortgage, for instance, or if you're remortgaging or something like that, then it looks like the Bank of England is going to be upping its base rate, its interest rate, potentially as early as next month, and it's currently 1.25%. That's obviously very different from what we all pay for our mortgages, etc. But the influence is how much mortgage costs are. Anyway, the talk is that might go from 1.25% to 1.75%. So if you've got a variable rate mortgage, or perhaps, or other forms of borrowing, maybe a personal loan, those borrowing costs could go up as well. So there's a lot of worrying things on the horizon, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wish we had better news for you, but I think it's better to go into this kind of armed with the facts. So thank you very much, Graham. Now, I just wanted to turn and talk about some of the help that's available for people who are worried about money and are struggling. And this is probably the number one thing, or definitely is the number one thing, which I'm asked as a money journalist. We get emails about this every single day. So I just wanted to take a moment just to run you through some of the pots of money on offer from the government and where we're at with that process. So the biggie here is the £650 cost of living payment for people who are on means tested benefits. So this started being paid out from Thursday of last week, from July the 14th. And this will basically be paid out throughout July. So if you haven't had it yet, don't worry. I had people emailing me even this morning. I haven't had this money. What's going on? Am I on the list? If you are on means tested benefits such as universal credit, you will get £326 this month. There is some people will drag over into next month. That's DWP saying if your case is particularly complicated, but they're trying to get most people paid up within July itself. And then there will be a second payment of £324 later in the autumn. We don't know the exact date for that yet, but we will let you know as soon as we know. If you're a pensioner, there is a £300 payment. That is the pensioner cost of living payment. That is going to come in November and December. Again, it's very likely, we don't know the exact dates, but it will be spread over. People will get it at different points within a 2-month period. If you are disabled, there is a £150 disability cost of living payment that is due to be made in September. Now, the kind of catch-all help for people who maybe, they don't fall into any of these, the above categories, or they fall into those categories, but they need a bit of extra help, something called the Household Support Fund. So this is a £1.5 billion pot of cash. It's being handed out by local councils to people in their area, but it's money that's coming from the government. Now, the main thing to point out with this is that you have to apply for it. So all of the other things that I've just mentioned there, you don't have to apply. The Household Support Fund, you do have to apply. You have to apply to your local council, give some information about your kind of circumstances, and then they will get back to you. Depending on your council, bit of a postcode lottery. Some will give you money, and some will give you things like supermarket vouchers. So it sort of depends, where you live as to what you get. Now, one thing I am hearing is that some councils are actually running out of this money. I've had a few people tell me that this week. If you've been told this by your council, if you've tried to apply for the Household Support Fund, and for whatever reason they've come back and said, look, I'm really sorry, we haven't got any money left in the pot, please do let me know. I'm looking into that now, and I'm trying to get this money to people and kind of do a story on this if I can. My email is sam.barker@mirror.co.uk, sam.barker@mirror.co.uk. I just wanted to talk a little bit as well about some of the exceptions to the rules that I've just spoken about. So if you're on housing benefit, it's a means tested benefit. So you probably have to be thinking, oh, well, great, I'm going to get the £650 payment. However, that is actually not the case, because if you're on housing benefit and no other benefits, HMRC cannot find you to give you the money. So what the Chancellor is asking people to do in this position is to apply to the Household Support Fund. So go to your local council and kind of ask for help there. However, it's not as generous. The highest amount that I've heard being given out by local council is around £200, whereas which is nothing really compared to the £650 you would have got if you were on another sort of means tested benefit. So the other thing to mention is tax credits. So if you are on tax credit, working tax credit or child tax credit, you will get the £650 payment, but you won't get it at the same time as everybody else. So you will get your first payment in the autumn rather than your first payment in July, and you will get your second payment in the winter rather than your second payment in the autumn. And the reason for this is that people on tax credits are being swapped over to universal credit, and the government is concerned that if they were to pay people who are on tax credits at the same time as everybody else, then swap them over to universal credit this year, they might end up paying them twice, which is obviously kind of good news for those people, but the government sees it as such an awful thing that it can't countenance that happening. So the bad news for you is that you'll get the money, but you'll be getting it slightly later. Now, I think that it's such a massive subject. I think that's all we've got time for today. I hope you found that useful, and thanks to everybody for tuning in today. If you have a question we haven't got around to it, you can email it to us. So my email again, sam.barker@mirror.co.uk. Thank you very much to Graham for giving up some of your time today. That's it from us, and we'll be holding another Facebook Live on another aspect of the cost of living crisis next Thursday at 1 p.m.